They cut me out of the inheritance, so I bought the house they were fighting over and kicked them out. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment where you're watching from. This motivates me to bring you more content. It's a story that unfolds in a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Chicago, a place where manicured lawns and two-car garages whisper of stability and tradition. But beneath the surface of that tranquility, a storm of resentment had been brewing for years, a slow-burning fire that was about to consume everything in its path. And at the center of it all was Chelsea. Chelsea was the quiet one, the one who always listened more than she spoke. She wasn't the golden child, the one who effortlessly commanded the room with charm and ambition. No, that was her older sister, Veronica, and her younger brother, Marcus. From childhood, they were a trio of different worlds. Veronica, the sharp-tongued perfectionist who seemed to believe the world was her stage. Marcus, the affable but entitled jock who was used to getting whatever he wanted. And Chelsea, the artist, the dreamer, the one who found solace in canvases and solitude. Their father, a man who built a successful law practice from nothing, was a figure of distant authority, and their mother was a whirlwind of social obligations and passive-aggressive comments, often praising Veronica's successes while subtly critiquing Chelsea's more unconventional path. The true heart of their family, the one person who truly saw Chelsea, was their grandmother, Eleanor. Eleanor lived in a beautiful old Victorian house on a corner lot, a house that was a character in itself. It had a wraparound porch that was perfect for lazy summer afternoons, a massive oak tree in the front yard that had held generations of tire swings, and a scent of old books and lavender that Chelsea could still conjure in her mind. Eleanor saw Chelsea's soul, the passion in her art and the kindness in her heart. They spent countless hours together in that house, Eleanor sharing stories of her life, and Chelsea showing her the paintings she created, the colors and shapes telling tales she couldn't find the words for. It was in that house that Chelsea felt she truly belonged. When Eleanor passed away in the spring of last year, it was a profound loss for everyone, but for Chelsea, it was a part of her soul being ripped away. The funeral was a somber affair, filled with the polite murmurs of distant relatives and the quiet grief of the family. The real drama, however, began a few weeks later when the family gathered at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. Veronica and Marcus sat with an air of expectation, their faces a mix of feigned sadness and thinly veiled anticipation. Their mother, too, was there, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Chelsea sat a little apart, her hands clasped in her lap, not for the inheritance, but for the closure she hoped to find. The lawyer, a man with a tired face and a kind demeanor, cleared his throat and began to read. He started with the minor bequests, jewelry to the cousins, a few small sums to charities. Then he got to the big stuff, the bulk of the financial assets. A sizable portfolio of stocks and savings was divided equally between Veronica and Marcus. The lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, and continued. The Victorian house, the one with the porch and the oak tree, was to be sold, and the proceeds were to be split 3 ways among Veronica, Marcus, and their mother. The lawyer then stated that Chelsea was to receive a modest single lump sum, a fraction of what her siblings were getting, and a collection of Eleanor's old art books. It was a slap in the face. The room fell silent for a moment before Veronica broke it with a high-pitched, triumphant laugh. "I knew it," she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "She knew you couldn't be trusted with anything substantial." Marcus just smirked, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. Their mother nodded, a sad, knowing look as if this was all a tragic necessity. Chelsea's heart shattered not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. She had loved Eleanor with all her heart, and she knew Eleanor had loved her. The will was a complete contradiction to the years of love and closeness they had shared. She stood up, her voice a low and controlled tremor. "Why?" she asked, looking at her siblings and her mother. "Why would she do this?" Veronica was the one to answer, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, please, Chelsea, don't be so dramatic. We all know you're not exactly the most responsible. You'd probably blow it all on some ridiculous art project. Mum and Dad always said you were too much of a dreamer." Her mother added, "It was for your own good, sweetie. You're just not a business person. We thought this was the best way to make sure you were taken care of without a large inheritance to mismanage. Your grandmother agreed with us." The words hit Chelsea like a physical blow. They had manipulated Eleanor. They had convinced her that Chelsea was not capable, not worthy, of the inheritance that should have been hers. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing, just folded his papers and wished them all well. Chelsea walked out of that office and into the cold Chicago afternoon with a new feeling in her gut, a hard, sharp stone of resolve that had replaced her grief. They had played their game. Now she would play hers. For the next few months, Chelsea disappeared. She stopped answering calls and ignored text messages. She threw herself into her art with a fury she hadn't felt before, but this time the canvas was not a place of escape. It was a place of focus. She sold a few of her more successful pieces, commissions she had been working on for months, and she took on new ones, demanding higher prices for her unique style. She worked relentlessly, saving every single penny. She learned to negotiate, to be a businesswoman, a role her family had said she was incapable of filling. Her anger was a fuel, not a distraction. She watched from a distance as Veronica and Marcus bickered over the house. Veronica wanted to turn it into a high-end rental property. Marcus wanted to sell it immediately and split the cash. Their mother was caught in the middle, trying to mediate while also hoping to get the best price for herself. The house, which had been a haven of love and warmth, was now a source of bitter conflict. The real estate market in their suburb was hot, and the house was a prime piece of property. The family was in no hurry to sell, believing they could wait for the highest offer. That was their first mistake. Chelsea had a plan, a cold, meticulous, and utterly satisfying plan. She used her severance pay from a part-time gallery job she had quit, along with the money she had made from her paintings, and sought out a new kind of professional. Not a lawyer, but a financial advisor. She explained her situation in a calm, detached voice, laying out her plan in a way that was so logical and sound that the advisor was taken aback. She wanted a mortgage. She wanted to buy her grandmother's house. She had enough for the down payment and a solid plan to cover the monthly payments. She knew the market, she knew the neighborhood, and she knew the sentimental value of the property, a value her family had chosen to ignore. Her family was expecting a buyer from a competing development company or a wealthy family from the city. They were not expecting her. The bidding on the house began. Veronica and Marcus set a price they thought was untouchable, believing they could squeeze every last penny out of the deal. They received a number of offers, some good, some great, and they held out for more. Then a new offer came in, a cash offer that was significantly higher than anything they had received so far. It was an offer they couldn't refuse. The lawyer for the estate called Veronica and Marcus, his voice a mix of surprise and excitement. "You won't believe this," he said. "The offer is well above asking price, and it's from a local buyer. They want to close quickly, a full cash offer. It's an incredible deal." They were ecstatic. They had gotten everything they wanted, and they believed it was their superior negotiating skills that had sealed the deal. They signed the papers a week later, practically tripping over each other in their haste to get to the bank. The house was sold, and the money was in their accounts. The very next day, a locksmith was at the house, a van with a bright red company logo parked in the driveway. He was changing the locks on all the doors and windows. A moving truck was also parked on the street, and a group of movers were unloading boxes from it. Veronica was the first to see it. She had driven past the house on her way to a luncheon, planning to stop and admire her good fortune. Her jaw dropped as she saw the activity. She pulled her car to the curb and got out, her heels clicking against the pavement. "What are you doing?" She shrieked at the locksmith, her voice shrill with indignation. The locksmith, a burly man with a kind face, just pointed to a woman standing on the porch, a woman who was calmly directing the movers with a clipboard in her hand. It was Chelsea. Veronica's face turned a shade of crimson that Chelsea hadn't seen since she was a little girl. She stormed up the walkway, her hands on her hips. "Chelsea, what is the meaning of this? What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of confusion and pure rage. Chelsea turned, a calm, serene smile on her face. "Hello, Veronica," she said, her voice soft and even. "I'm moving in." Veronica laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You're moving in? Don't be ridiculous. The house was sold yesterday. We've already closed the deal." "Yes," Chelsea replied, still smiling. "And I was the one who bought it." The look on Veronica's face was priceless. It was a moment of dawning horror, a slow realization of a perfectly orchestrated trap. Just then, Marcus pulled up, his phone pressed to his ear, arguing with someone on the other end. He saw Chelsea on the porch and hung up, a look of pure confusion on his face. "Chelsea, what's going on?" he asked, walking up to the porch. "Mom just called me in a panic, saying you're at the house." Chelsea turned to him. "I am. I bought it." Marcus's initial confusion morphed into anger. "You bought it? With what money? You didn't have enough for a coffee, let alone this house," he sneered. "Our lawyer said the buyer was an anonymous cash buyer, a huge development company or something, not you." Chelsea simply held up the clipboard, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am the anonymous buyer. I am Chelsea, a local art business owner, and the money I used was from my art. The art you all dismissed as a silly hobby. Funny how that works out, isn't it?" Her family had underestimated her at every turn. They had assumed she was too emotional, too naive, too unbusinesslike to ever be a threat. They had convinced their grandmother that Chelsea was a flight risk, someone who would squander her inheritance, and in doing so, they had unwittingly created a monster of ambition and resolve. They had believed the house would be their spoils, a physical representation of their victory over her, a final act of exclusion. But Chelsea had been watching, waiting, and working. She had used the very insults they had leveled against her as fuel. She was not a business person. She had just outsmarted them in the biggest real estate deal of their lives. She was too much of a dreamer. That dream had just become a beautiful, tangible reality. Their mother arrived a few minutes later, her face pale and her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked from Veronica's furious face to Marcus's dumbfounded expression, and then to Chelsea, who was standing on the porch of the house she had just bought. "Chelsea, sweetie, what have you done?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "We did it for your own good. We were trying to help you. We had to do it. You would have wasted the money." Chelsea looked at her mother, her eyes clear and unwavering. "No," she said, her voice firm and low. "You did it for your own good. You did it because you couldn't stand the idea of me having something of my own, something that was a direct link to a person who loved me for who I was, not for what I could become. You thought you could take that away from me. You were wrong." Veronica, always the loudest, stepped forward. "You can't just kick us out. We have to go through the house one last time. There are things we need to get." Chelsea's smile didn't falter. She held up a small brown box. "I've already done that," she said. "I went through the estate sale records and the closing documents. Everything that wasn't included in the sale of the house was to be donated to charity, as per the will. I made an exception, however, and I gathered a few of your childhood mementos, things I thought you might want. They're all in this box. I'll leave it for you on the curb. But you can't come in. This is my house now, and my new home." The three of them stood on the curb, staring at the woman they had cast out, the quiet one they had underestimated for her entire life, as she stood on the porch of their grandmother's house. Her new house. The moving truck's ramp was being pulled up, and the locksmith was finishing his work, a sense of finality in the click of the lock. Chelsea walked to the edge of the porch, clutching her clipboard, and looked down at her family. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about being responsible," she said, a hint of steel in her voice. "And you did. You taught me that the only person you can truly trust is yourself. And you also taught me that the best revenge isn't a loud confrontation, but a quiet, meticulous plan. The best revenge is a beautiful old Victorian house with a wraparound porch and an oak tree in the front yard. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some unpacking to do." A duds. As she turned and walked inside, closing the door behind her, the lock clicked one last time. The family stood there for a long moment, watching the house that had been in their family for generations, the house that they had fought over and sold, now owned by the very person they had conspired to betray. The irony was so perfect, so complete, that it felt like a silent, crushing weight. Chelsea, inside, walked through the familiar rooms, the scent of old books and lavender already settling in the air. She was home, and it was all hers. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago sky in shades of orange and pink, a beautiful and peaceful ending to a very long, very quiet war.